I want to start with clothes, such a familiar subject for us. We never think about when and how it appeared. It seems to us that there have always been clothes. Although historians claim that primitive man walked naked and only later dressed in animal skins. Let it be so. But when did he start wearing woven clothes? Probably when the fabric appeared. And how could it have appeared? But this question, like many others, is dismissed by pundits. It doesn't matter, somehow it appeared and that's it. Why bother? In fact, this is very important. After all, without an answer to this simple question, the whole story will crumble like a house of cards. Although we have scattered this house for a long time, let's look at a few more aspects of the story. So, the fabric. What do we see? A herd of monkeys, subhumans. They live in caves and dress in the skins of slaughtered animals. How could they want to dress up in thin clothes made of fabric, the existence of which they had no idea? Of course, it's easy for monkeys to create fabric. It's just a matter of a suitable plant, cotton, flax or hemp. Let it be flax. Fortunately, the forest is full of it, and the monkeys know perfectly well what it looks like. It is necessary to peel 500 kilograms of seeds, say, and prepare them for sowing. Then find the field, clear it. Uproot trees and bushes, dig up the earth with unknown things, and sow seeds. Monkeys know when and how. They have a natural instinct. Now you need to wait for the plants to ripen. The flax needs to be cut, then dried. And pull out the threads, boil, bleach, pull out again, and get the yarn. Everything can be woven on a loom, if it is very brief. In fact, fabric production is a labor-intensive and high-tech process, currently for processing. Kiln will require dozens of devices and mechanisms. But the monkeys are all for nothing. They will cope like this. They will assemble a loom from sticks and weave fabrics. It's a pity there are no scissors and needles. It is difficult to sew a dress without them. How did we manage without them? But it doesn't matter, because we have historians. You need to ask them, for sure they know. And indeed, the answer is already ready. Prehistoric people used fish bones instead of needles. I would like to give these scientists bones and let them try to sew something. But seriously, what is needed for production? Fabrics, developed agriculture, weaving mills, power engineering, design institutes, engineers, skilled workers. And most importantly, all of this should appear at the same time, since without any of these bells, nothing will work. Historians have nothing to do with anything. They don't want to see the obvious things. Their task is to bring all the studies under a wild idea. Here is a pure example from our time. You all know that there are tribes that are completely cut off from civilization, living on separate islands. And they are not even going to develop. But some tribes have been living there for thousands of years and up to our time. Take, for example, Sentinel Island. I think you all know about him. They are not going to melt metal, sew wheat, weave clothes or move from continents. On the continent, they will shoot a bird with a bow or catch a fish, eat it and sleep. And the same thing for tomorrow. And we have quite a lot of such tribes on Earth. So why don't they develop and stand in one place for thousands of years? That scientists are not born among them who would be smart enough to create metal or clothing. They still live in the Stone Age. Arrowheads made of stone, spears made of stone, axes also made of stone. It's unfortunate, but these people are not capable of more. Yes, I will tell you more, if indeed, as according to official history, all of humanity passed through the Stone Age. We would still be in the Stone Age now. Understand that a person cannot create something that he has no idea about until he is shown or told how it is done. For example, take a white blank sheet now, and try to draw and depict something that is not yet on Earth right now. If you can't, then I think they will what? Look at the speed with which there has been a huge leap in technology. Even 30 years ago, we could not imagine such a world. And then, as if at the behest of a pike, computers, tablets, iPhones, electric cars, motorcycles. You're probably waiting for an answer from me. But then how did it happen? How did people come up with all this? I will disappoint you, but I do not know the answer to this question. One thing I can say is that everything we have around the world right now is not an invention of mankind. However, let's continue. Wooden ships under white sails. The story is packed to the brim with them. Extravaganzas, naval battles, and other romance. Scientists claim that tens of thousands of wooden ships sailed across the seas and oceans. But who, where, and how they were built do not specify, annoyingly waving off inconvenient questions and repeating their favorite phrase. They did everything. What difference does it make how it was, period? I will not ask where the navigators took millions of square meters of canvas and tens of thousands of kilometers of cables and ropes. I will ask how they built their ships, or rather, how they sawed the boards firm which they were subsequently made. The hull of the ship, and most importantly, what? In those distant times, metal had not yet learned how to melt. Well, okay, let's say they somehow made an axe, but you can't make a board with an axe. They were the mill. The question seems to be simple, but there is no answer. After all, in order to cut a tree on a board, you need a saw, even if not electric, but at least two-handed. And to make a saw, you need steel, and moreover, sheet steel. And for this, alas, we need a rolling mill and a metallurgical plant. Well, the minds, mechanical engineering, and went. Let's go, let's go. And as always, all of this is needed at the same time. How did they sail on the sea in those distant times? Or did you not swim? Take the bearded Vikings. There on their ships, Drakkar has Isborski the ocean far and wide. They say they've even been to America. And look at this Drakkar. It's such a hefty boat with 24 oars. Beautiful, of course. The designers of our game did their best. But how to swim on it? After all, it is completely open. Where they cooked food on it, hid from the rain, slept on it. Finally, that they had been paddling all day without food or sleep. And look at these huge oars, how much they could weigh. And even more interesting is how these 20 mushrooms got into so, because it's difficult even in calm water. And with the excitement at sea, this is simply impossible. Some mushrooms have oars in the water, while others wave through the air. They'll probably sail far away. Let's imagine one campaign of these Vikings. They dressed up, as it should be, in skins, put their designer helmets on their heads, sat down in a boat. And, as luck would have it, there was a wave on the sea. But there's nothing to do, we have to swim, rob someone. But they pushed the boat away from the shore. Wives and children waved their hands. Meanwhile, the bearded men took up the oars and let's swing them. Waving, waving, but everything is not in the wrong. They only pour water on each other. After 10 minutes they look, and the boat is in the same place. In vain only on the water and paddled. That's the way things are. The Vikings, by the way, did not have simple swords at all. The metal for their manufacture turned out to be so pure that it baffled scientists. It turns out that in order to purify the metal from impurities to such an extent, an incredibly complex technology is required. Even in our conditions, it's not easy to do this, but wild people did. They probably had a lot of chemistry and metallurgy skills. But if so, why did they run around in skins and ride horses, and not in exoskeletons, and not on airplanes? Think about it, and I'll continue. Take Genghis Khan with his 300,000th army, who tormented poor Russia for 300 years. All right, 300,000 troops. But in order to feed him, he still had to carry 1 million sheep with him. And how did this horde get across the Siberian taiga? And how did you cross the Siberian rivers? Historians are silent. After all, their task is not to tell how it was, but to tell how it was not. After all, there is no history. We are in the Matrix. The game appeared here recently, already and all at once. We are here in the role of an NPC, and that is not a game character. Pause it and read carefully what it is. And then ask yourself the question, how do you differ from an NPC? After all, we, ordinary people, live by the system. A child is born, goes to kindergarten, then to school, then to college, then works half his life, then retires to wait for his end. This is how 90% of the world's population lives, and the remaining 10% are the real ones. Players who play for their characters. There are those players who have good intentions, and there are those who have malicious ones. They are known to you as the dark forces and the light ones. And when one or the other side wins, the world is reset and created all over again. How do you like this theory? And in order to somehow lead us into this game, they invented the past. The designers of the game drew a wonderful picture of the past times, and we believed in it. However, let's touch on the topic of bridges. As you have already understood, without bridges, no movement of large masses of people is possible. Therefore, there are no conquests, no campaigns, no Silk Roads, no trade between countries. That is, if all this happened, then there were bridges. And they were built by people living in a slave-owning society. Well, let's see how bridges are built. More precisely, how to install supports for bridges. And this is done as follows. A cylinder is welded from steel sheets with a diameter equal to approximately the width of the support. Let's say 10 meters, and a height of 20 meters, if the depth of the river, for example, is 15 meters. This metal cylinder is loaded onto a barge and taken to the installation site of the support. Here, a cylinder is placed on the bottom with a crane. Then water is pumped out of it with pumps. Then it is poured with concrete. Then metal structures are installed, and all this is poured with concrete again. So gradually there is a support. What is needed for this? Everything is as always. Metallurgy, mechanical engineering, the production of concrete in huge quantities, heavy-duty screens, and everything like that. The ancients had all this. If not, then there was no story. If so, this is our time. Therefore, I leave behind all these Spartans, Genghis Khan, guards of all armies, crusaders and others. There is no place for them in life, so they did not exist. All of them are suitable for novels, paintings by painters and museums. And in conclusion, a few words about geographical maps. Question: who compiled the ancient maps? In what way? Try to take a piece of paper, go into the forest, and make a map of the area. Will it work? No. And the ancients somehow managed to do it. According to scientists, they say that they used a compass and a telescope for this. But that's not possible. And where did they get all this, by the way? They don't explain. So how did they do it? And they didn't do it in any way. To create a map, you need to get up in the air and photograph the area. After that, perform a complex process with the help of diegetic instruments to determine the terrain, and a lot more. It makes no sense to describe the whole process. The ancient people did not have and could not have any maps. Of course, on the internet you can find perfectly preserved maps of all times and peoples, only they are all created artificially. Intelligence for that time, not for ours. And how they got into our time is another question, to which, unfortunately, I do not know the answer. So, medieval Europe. The days of knights, King Arthur, jousting tournaments, a feat for beautiful ladies, the war between a white and red rose. Again, the romance of the princess sitting by the window, waiting for her lover, while he defeats the dragons. Let's pay attention to the warrior's costume, how suitable it is for battle. Here, an iron bucket on the head is a mandatory attribute. For the eyes, of course, it's not as beautiful as a Spartan helmet, but it's the same crazy manufacture. How can you fight in battle, looking into these slits? Is there really something visible through them, especially in motion? Surprisingly, upon closer examination, it turns out that the armor is made of sheet steel. Apparently, there was a small rolling mill somewhere in the castle. By the way, a full set of metal armor weighed 58 kilograms. If such a knight is pushed slightly, he will fall with a great crash and will never get up again. You can take it calmly and carry it for scrap. I'm still silent about how they could even climb on a horse in such armor. And the knight's one-handed sword weighed 7 kg. And if two-handed, then 15 kg. So how many times was it possible to swing such a sword? Wave to -3 times, and that's it, exhale already. But it doesn't matter, because all this was ultimately done not for battles, but again to create an image. Albeit a gloomy, but attractive time, where harsh men swore on blood, and their wives gave dinner. Silence or something like that. This is all a literary novel, not a story. Let's take today as the basis of the material the construction of the White Sea-Baltic Canal, the construction of which lasted from 1931 to 1933. Let's not go into details, but just take a look at the numbers. We are told that it was built in 600 days by the forces of prisoners, which is the White Sea Canal. This is not a channel dug with shovels and filled with water at all. This is a complex engineering and technical structure with a duration of 227 kilometers. It includes 128 facilities, 19 locks, 15 plateaus, 49 dams, 33 artificial channels, 5 hydroelectric power plants, and many other structures. You can believe it was done in 600 days. I'll add a few more numbers. During the construction, 21 million cubic meters of earthworks were carried out. 921,000 wooden yarns were cut down. 390,000 cubic meters of concrete were laid. There were 4,300 explosions in the rocks. The total weight of the excavated rock exceeds 5 million tons. The length of the drilled holes for explosions is 2,406 kilometers. And in conclusion, 2,600 kilometers of railway. And all this in 600 days. These are the miracles that unskilled workers are capable of, having only hand tools, shovels, crowbars, chisels, hand saws, stretchers, and wheelbarrows. For a better understanding, let's calculate what these heroes of labor had to do every day. Produce 35,000 cubic meters of earthworks. Drill 4,000 meters into the rock to lay explosives. And this, by the way, is 5.5 meters every minute during a 12-hour working day. I'm not counting the time for lunch and rest yet. Try hollowing out 5 meters with a crowbar in 1 minute. Even with the help of modern technologies, there with the help of a punch and all other tools, it is simply impossible to do this. And they somehow manage to drill 5 meters a minute with a crowbar, a pickaxe. I do not know what they work there, to be honest. But we listen further. Then make 7 explosions and remove 8,300 tons of rock at a speed of 11 tons per minute. Lay 650 cubic meters of concrete, build 4 kilometers of railway with all communications. I think there's no point in continuing. A person familiar with the production will understand that this is nonsense. It is impossible to do this. I think it was impossible to make even such a gigantic construction project in 600 days. Speaking of projects, when we look at the magnificent buildings of past eras, we are amazed at their beauty and grandeur. All these castles, fortresses, cathedrals, palaces are masterpieces of architecture. It is not clear how they could build in those days. Numerous researchers are trying to figure this out, because the explanation of official historians looks ridiculous and ridiculous. I want to point out one aspect that is usually ignored, but without which none of these buildings and structures could have been born. As you may have guessed, this is design. Nothing can be built without project work. Even a shed in a suburban area requires at least a working drawing. And such buildings as, for example, the Hermitage, must be accompanied by tons of project documentation. Even small interior elements are made according to individual projects. However, there are no projects in any of the hundreds of thousands of buildings on Earth. There are only drawings that allegedly depict the stages of construction. Therefore, if these buildings were actually built by someone, they must have designed documentation. Designing is not just about creating a drawing on paper. This is a huge range of all kinds of work that must necessarily be done before construction begins. What do you need to create a project? The first is the building regulations governing engineering surveys, design, and construction. These are SNPs, but I remind you that SNPs appeared in the USSR only in 1954. 2. People who are able to carry out such activities. Topographers, geodesists, architects, and builders. 3. Special equipment for topographic survey, geodesic. Research, drawing, copying equipment, tons of paper at last. In order to create all this, building devices, pulp and paper and chemical industries, mechanical engineering, energy, etc., must be developed. I note that all this is necessary not for the structure, but only to ensure project work. 4. Time. Designing is quite a long process. I can say that even the design and approval of a simple barracks-type structure took firm 6 months to a year. Imagine how long it would take to design St. Petersburg with its canals, drawbridges, and everything else. But the history doesn't say anything about designing. Why? Because the education system and the corresponding industry should be attached to the projects. We know none of this happened. Otherwise, historians would have to explain how to calculate the foundation of the Taj Mahal in India. Who taught Saparmat builders Kolnar Dam Cathedral, where he studied the topography, diabesity, and technology of ancient Rome. It is much easier to show knights in iron spacesuits, Roman senators wrapped in sheets, and Spartans in metal helmets. History is a gallery of beautiful pictures and nothing else. There was no history. Nobody built this whole wonderful world. It appeared simultaneously with ready-made houses, factories, railways, power plants, and other things. I have talked about this in many of my videos because the story is completely made up. It is filled with inconsistencies and absurdities. Since childhood, we have been taught that man is the crown of nature. Millions of years ago, he was an ignorant savage, but thanks to hard work, he developed to his current state. Built a civilization, learned to fly into space, and so on. We used to believe that man created everything himself. But is it so? Let's try to refute this statement. So, what couldn't people do? The first one. Create a language. We don't think about how the languages we speak came to be. And no matter how much we rack our brains in search of an answer, we will not find it. It is impossible to imagine a situation when a group of people gathers to give a name to all the objects and phenomena of life. And not just name them, but also come up with connecting words, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and besides. Moreover, grammar rules. But how can this be done if there are no such concepts? Even hypothetically, it is impossible to imagine the appearance of a language in a whole nation as a result of people's actions. They didn't create it. The language is a program written in our minds. Every nation has its own. A newborn baby does not learn the language. He just remembers it. Second, people could not change the language. We know that in the languages of our ancestors, it differs from the modern language to such an extent that it is almost impossible to understand it. And actually why? Let the outdated words have disappeared and new ones have appeared, but a huge array. The words were changed, the mouth turned into lips, the eyes into the eyes, the cheeks into the cheeks, the bee in the head. A week's sleep, and so on. How and why did all the people start calling things by other names? Why don't we change the words now? It can't even occur to me. We have no motive for this, let alone the possibilities. But still, the old languages have changed. What's the matter? The language program has been replaced with its new version. We've been reprogrammed. Third, people could not create a civilization. The reasons are many. Consider 1. Metal production. Agree that you cannot build a civilization without metal. How could our ancestors have smelted it? First of all, it is impossible to guess that something solid can be produced from the earth. Secondly, you need to know what iron ore looks like and where it is located. Thirdly, to pick up tons of this ore with sticks. Fourth, extract the metal from it. Try to do it using modern knowledge. Imagine that there is a pile of earth in front of you. Now melt the metal, having only sticks, stones, and clay available. It will work, alas, but no. And most importantly, in order to melt metal, you need to have a metal container already. Fourth, people couldn't build cities. The cities are interconnected by underground passages and a network of communications. They are tightly connected to each other. And also look at the centers of famous cities. People are not built. People were just finishing them. However, everything built by people during the reboot is crumbling to dust. This is the value of human labor. Fifth, people did not settle around the world. Scientists and historians assure us that humanity has constantly migrated, settled new lands. territories and gradually filled the entire planet. People, it is unclear how, even moved to other continents in droves of millions. It's impossible to imagine. Having decided on such madness, these daredevils would have found themselves on certain starvation. For the sake of a mythical dream, no one will leave a habitable place. Let's imagine that you have an established way of life, a roof over your head, dug up land, cattle, a family in the end. And then, for no reason at all, something hits you in the head, and you decided to leave your home, knowing that it is possible ahead. Certain death. People are not idiots, so even now, with a lot of opportunities, there are simply no people willing to move to an unfamiliar wild place. Each of us was settled in a settlement prepared for this purpose. Sixth, people didn't create religions. We are told that some saints have brought advanced ideas into the world that have captured the minds of millions of people. Try to come up with an idea that would have at least 1,000 followers. And so that they don't get tired of it in a month, even states with propaganda and controlled mass media cannot control even a small part of the population for a long time. And this is with our communication capabilities, but in the old days, well, some minister will come to town and start telling religious stories. Well, Adam the parrot. And what? Who will listen to him? Nobody. Take, for example, sects. How do they differ from the world religions? Nothing. The same crazy ideas, but in a different wrapper. Why do they have so few followers? Because they were created by people, and religions are control programs written in our minds. Moreover, the programs are test programs. They act only on those who are not able to think critically and draw independent conclusions. Who takes everything for granted, afraid of hell and crave paradise. For such people, religion is the very thing. For the rest, they have no meaning. Seventh, people couldn't make music. Metal is used in all musical instruments. And as we already know, people were not able to get it. And strings made of intestines, silk threads and animal veins, of course, can be played. But only on the pages of historical books. People are also not able to make magnificent statues with a veil out of marble. To build cathedrals to the sky, to paint pictures, putting on them 30 layers of paint with a total thickness, thinner than a human hair. People did not create all the masterpieces of architecture, sculpture, music, painting, and literature. They are not capable of it. Look at modern art, architecture, listen to modern music, read books. You will see that there is a big gap between the classics and the great works of ancient masters created by higher beings, the architects of our world. These are samples, a landmark that shows which way to move. But people are moving towards simplification, so it's faster and cheaper. This principle applies in all branches of human activity, and this is degradation. For more than 100 years, we have unconditionally believed everything that the media broadcast to us from the page. Newspapers of TV screens and school textbooks were told. But it's time to wake up. Humanity has existed on this planet for no more than 200 years and has nothing to do, not only with the Egyptian and other pyramids, but also with the cities in which it lives. All our fundamental scientific discoveries are a set of tales. Judge for yourself. An apple fell on Newton's head, and he discovered the law of universal gravitation. Archimedes was taking a bath, and oh, eureka! Archimedes' law came up with. Mendeleev was asleep and saw the periodic table of elements, and so on. Do you think that machine language, programming language, and personal computer were invented by people? I doubt it very much. Everything we know about the Earth, the solar system, and the universe suggests that perhaps we exist in the derived volume of the universe, a space capsule. Time, the so-called realities, and the laws of this reality may differ from the laws of the rest of the universe. We don't know where the boundary of our reality lies. Maybe our reality occupies a part, or maybe the entire volume of the universe. What if the universe is just a drawing on the cover of our reality? Isn't that why cosmological scientific thought is tossing from dark matter to dark energy? It seems that these terms were borrowed from Star Wars. Our reality and humanity have a creator. Yes, it's a logical dead end, but it's no worse. The singularities of the Big Bang or the biblical divine creation. The whole human history is made up and, in fact, is a pile of absurdity. It's unbelievable how we believed in all this for so many years, and 99% of people continue to believe. It's easier for them. Someone or something regularly corrects our reality from the outside, throwing us new scientific ideas and technologies at the level of ready-made productions, and setting the vector of development for humanity. If there is any clarity with science and technology, then what? It happens to our mentality. It is covered with twilight. We have ceased to understand what is happening to the human world and where everything is going. Everything is mixed up. Moral guidelines, human values, are the result of outside interference. Or our consciousness simply does not keep up with the rapid scientific and technological process. Yes, these are just my thoughts. I do not urge you to believe them unconditionally, only with a critical look, looking around you and thinking. The reality in which we exist is not linear. I can't explain exactly what it is, and hardly anyone can. In life, this means that its development in time does not occur progressively from the past to the future and at a constant speed. We feel this as a kind of surprise when we suddenly discover that our memory of some well-known event is unexpectedly different. Let it be in minor details from his official version or from the memory of other witnesses of this event. Usually we write it off as forgetfulness. But what happens to human consciousness when it gets into a cause and effect explosion? When suddenly two segments of reality, unrelated to each other, come together. The fabric of time, or sometimes even logic. Do we notice it? Or is it only visible to the next generation? How do we see the white spots in our recent history? Perhaps it is then that eyewitnesses of events that did not actually happen appear. I want to give an example of such a change in our reality based on the events of 1947-53. We are talking about the construction of 7 Stalinist skyscrapers in Moscow. This grandiose event in the history of Soviet urban planning and architecture is perceived by us as completely natural. But mesothelium, the review never happened. The idea of their construction is attributed to Stalin. But is it so? What kind of leader of the state, in his right mind, half of which lies in ruins after a severe war, in which more than 20 million able-bodied people were lost, and the active population, and half of the population does not eat and lives in dugouts and barracks. Instead of throwing all his strength and resources at restoring the national economy and making life easier for the victorious people, he will suddenly be engaged in decorating his own capital. No one needs skyscrapers, but it costs a lot of money and human labor. Where did the finances for the construction of these skyscrapers come from? If there were even problems with bread in the Soviet Union after the war, where did the workers who built these skyscrapers come from? In these years, it was simply unrealistic to build Stalin's skyscrapers. And now about the Titanic, the only ship in the world that all the inhabitants of the earth know about. His amazing story tells in great detail about the death of the largest ship from a collision with an iceberg. James Cameron, who created the film of the same name, which was watched by billions of viewers, has a special merit here. But did the Titanic really exist? The question seems absurd. How could it be otherwise? Moreover, we have seen the remains of the Titanic at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But does this prove that the Titanic was a real ship? In the depths of the waters, there are many sunken wooden sailing ships. However, researchers have proved that it is impossible to build a wooden vessel in principle, and there are many reasons for this. But even if such a vessel had been built, the first strong wave would have blown it to pieces. It turns out that sailing ships are an impossible thing, but the wreckage lying in the depths proves the opposite. How does something exist that cannot and should not be? About this at the end of the video. Take a look at the photos of the Titanic. If you look closely, they're all fake. This is evident because different objects such as people and vehicle have a different contrast. Take a picture with the CB filter now and you will notice the difference. In your pictures, everything will have the same brightness and contrast. As it turned out, photos of the Titanic are not so many as we would like. Here are a few of them. Now the name itself. It always seemed to me that a huge ship was named after a more suitable toy. They say the Titanic is named after the heroes of the ancient Greek myths of the Titans. If the creators of the ship wanted to match the name of the ship and its huge size, it would have been necessary to simply call it Titan. But by adding the end of the ic, they instantly deprived the image of the ship of power and greatness. What if Titanic has nothing to do with Titans? Maybe the name has a different meaning. The tragedy of the Titanic is fed to us so that we believe in history and that the world is real. Where do the ancient artifacts come from, the remains of ships that could not be built? Knights, swords, and coins, the metal for which the ancient people were unable to melt. We created them with our minds. Each of us generates mental energy. By directing it to an object or phenomenon of life, we materialize it. The Titanic is food for our mind, and its remains on the days of the ocean have never been a ship and have not plowed the seas. They immediately appeared on the bottom in the form of rusty iron, as well as the remains of wooden ships. Why can't we still find the place of the Kulikovo battle and the ice battle? Even the exact coordinates of the Battle of Borodino are unknown because we don't think about them. Our mental energy is not enough to materialize the places of great battles. What to do? Make films on these topics, write books, and talk about it on TV. The main thing is to captivate people, create the right images in their minds, and a miracle will happen. Out of nowhere, Mongol helmets, shields of Tifton knights, and broken guns of Napoleon will appear underground. And that's it for today. See you again on the Templario channel. All of you have a sound mind and a pure mind.